Alright guys, Henry here. So Marvel Rivals, as I'm recording this, is just around the corner and I'm so excited. I haven't been this excited in a hero shooter for a while. The last game I got this excited for a hero shooter was Apex Legends when Season 4 was coming out, which came out 4 years ago. And with Marvel Rivals coming out soon, it got me thinking about Marvel in general. Marvel is such a big brand it is, and it's surprising I haven't made a video about it until today. So just like what I did with Overwatch and Minecraft, I'm going to be gathering up a bunch of heroes and villains from Marvel and giving them their very own Pokémon types. Another thing I'm also going to be doing that I did in my other videos, so I'm going to put them into categories. There'll be 3 categories. First up are just heroes. General superheroes, protectors of cities and everything. Then there's going to be anti-heroes, which are like heroes but not in the best light. They're either extremely violent or extremely mean in general. And then finally we have villains, good old bad guys. Now before this video starts, I just want to say I'm sorry. In my last Pokemon Types video, the Minecraft one, I didn't type the mobs properly. Instead of just giving them only 2 types, like if they were actual Pokemon, I didn't do that, and I'm sorry. For example, I gave the Drowned 4 types, that being Ghost, Water, Grass, and Steel, and I didn't finish it by giving them 2 types. I just left it like that. That's what I wanted to do with these videos. Give them types like how Pokemon would. Only give them 2 or 1. So I'm going to be doing that in this video. Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the video. Starting with the heroes. Now, again, before I get into the superheroes, I'm going to be talking about 4 specific teams. With the first team I'm going to be looking at are the Avengers. Now, there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of members of the Avengers, as well as different versions of the Avengers as well. But I'm only going to be doing like the main 6 that people will regularly know. Starting off with the first Avenger, Captain America. Captain America will be a pure fighting type. The reason for that is that the fighting type is somewhat of a hero type. They fight with honor and pride. That's why the fighting type is strong against the dark type, because the dark type are all about fighting in malicious ways. And Captain America is the superhero of all time, up there with Superman. And because of that, Captain America will be a pure fighting type. Next up, we have the Playboy billionaire turned armored Avenger. We have Iron Man. I've got 3 types for Iron Man. First up is the Steel type. I don't really need to explain why he should be Steel type. It's pretty obvious. The next type is the Fire type. The Fire type is mainly because of him shooting missiles and laser beams. And the third type is the Flying type because, well, majority of his Iron Man suits fly. But flying is a bit of a weak one, so I'm just going to make Iron Man a Steel Fire type. Next up, we have the son of Odin and the god of thunder, Thor. Again, I got 3 types for Thor, starting with the electric type. And just like Iron Man, I don't really need to explain why he should be electric type. He's the god of thunder. The next type is the fairy type. Now, the reason for the fairy type is because the fairy type is like the strongest magic type there is in Pokemon. Out of psychic, dragon, and fairy, fairy is the strongest out of these 3 types, even though all of them are essentially a magic type. And because Thor is a god, it makes sense for him to have the fairy type, the strongest magic type, because gods are essentially incredibly powerful and magical beings they are. And the third type is the flying type. Unlike with Iron Man, where he can actually fly, Thor can't fly. Now, I know that doesn't make any sense, but hear me out. Not like that. Thor doesn't fly. He essentially throws his hammer and then basically grabs onto it and pretty much lets the hammer take him wherever it's going. But at the same time, unlike with Iron Man, Thor can actually create storms. So that is a good enough reason to give him the flying type. But in general, I'm going to give Thor the electric fairy type instead. Next up, we have the Jolly Green Giant, as well as my favourite superhero of all time. We have the Incredible Hulk. I have 4 types for this man. Starting off, we have the fighting type. Unlike with Captain America, where the fighting type is somewhat of a heroic type, and Captain America is a very, he is the definition of a superhero, Hulk, on the other hand, is given the fighting type because he's essentially the muscle of the group. Hulk is extreme, and I mean extremely strong. While you don't really see it in the movies, if you look at the comics, he is overpowered. I mean, there's a whole Hulk saga called World War Hulk, where he's so strong he can break planets. He's that strong. The second type I'm thinking is the poison type. Now, the reason for the poison type is because of its radiation. The radiation basically created the Hulk. There isn't a radiation type, but I think the best type for it is the poison type. The next type is the dark type. Now, unlike with the other heroes, Hulk can't really be controlled that much. Because of that, he is a very violent hero. But I wouldn't say he's like an anti-hero though, because he still has good intentions and tries not to harm people. And finally, we have the psychic type. And the psychic type is because of Bruce Banner, actually. Bruce Banner is an incredible, and I mean incredibly intelligent scientist he is. So him having the psychic type makes sense. Now, honestly, this is a really hard one to do, because all 4 of his types fit in so well. I think the only one that doesn't fit in that well is the psychic type, but that's only because I'm talking about the Hulk, not Bruce Banner though. So this one is generally really hard, but I'm going to make the Hulk a fighting poison type. While the dark type fits him quite well, really, I don't know. I just think of him being incredibly strong with the fighting type, and him being overpowered with radiation fits the poison type. So I'm going to make him a fighting poison type. Next up, we have the most boring hero in the Avengers. We have Hawkeye. Hawkeye being a guy with a bow and arrow, I think it should just be normal type, but maybe psychic? Okay, hear me out on this one, okay? The reason for the psychic type is because Hawkeye needs accuracy. He needs to know what he's shooting. Kind of like the idea of psychic people having like a third eye, so they're more accurate to what they're predicting or talking about. That's kind of my reason for the psychic type, but it's really not that strong if I'm being honest. So I'm questioning if I should make him a psychic type. I'm just going to make him a pure normal type because I'm not 100% sure on the psychic type. And finally, we have the final member of the Avengers. We have Black Widow. Black Widow, being a assassin and a spy, should definitely be a dark type. There's nothing really else to talk about. She should just be a dark type. The next Marvel team we're going to be looking at are the Fantastic Four, starting with Mr. Fantastic, aka Reed Richards. Now, honestly, this is a really hard character to give a Pokemon type to because there isn't a rubber type. So because of that, I'm just going to make him a pure psychic type just because of how intelligent he is. Next up, we have the Invisible Woman. I'm going to make the Invisible Woman a psychic fairy type. Psychic because, again, she's very intelligent. And fairy because she is a protector. She creates force fields and stuff and makes people invisible and can make herself invisible. So she's a lot more support based. So that's why I'm going to give her the fairy type. Next up, we have the Human Torch. Being a Human Torch, he should be, and 100% should be, a fire type. I'm also going to give him the flying type because I want to give him a second type, but there isn't another type that fits him aside from the flying type because, well, he flies. Next up, we have that big rock thing, the Thing. The Thing should be a rock fighting type. Rock because he's Big Rock Man, and fighting because he is the muscle of the group, just like I did with the Hulk. Next up, we have the Guardians of the Galaxy, starting off with Star-Lord. Star-Lord is a bit of a hard one, but I do have something. I'm going to make Star-Lord a normal psychic type. Normal because he's half human, and psychic because he's half Kree. But if we're not talking about the comic version, we're talking about the movie version, it still fits because he's half human and half alien. He's apparently half human, half celestial. Celestials are essentially space gods. So yeah, normal psychic fits Star-Lord quite well. Next up, we have the daughter of the Mad Titan himself, Gamora. I think Gamora would be a dark fighting type. Dark because she was mainly a villain before she became a hero, and fighting because she trained with Thanos, and also she's a skilled martial artist and stuff. Next up, we have Drax. I don't think there's any type aside from fighting that really fits Drax. He's generally pure fighting, he is, and that's it. That's all he's gonna get, honestly. Next up, we have Rocket Raccoon.
Don't call me a raccoon!
Sorry, Rocket. He's not a raccoon. even though he is. I think Rocket should just be a pure steel type, not only because of the surgery they had to do with him, with all the nuts and bolts that's technically in him, but also he is a skilled gunsman, he is, and basically is a big lover of guns. Next up, we have Rocket's partner in crime. We have Groot. Groot is kind of an easy one. I've got 3 types for him. Starting with grass, I really don't need to explain why the big tree guy should be a grass type. The other type is the fighting type, and just like it with the Thing and the Hulk, I'm giving him the fighting type because he's the muscle of the group. And finally, we have the psychic type because he's an alien. But that's a bit of a weak reasoning to give him that, so I'm just going to make him a grass fighting type. Next up, we have Mantis. Even though she's named after a literal insect, I don't think she should be a bug type. She's just nicknamed it. She isn't an actual alien bug. She's just nicknamed it because of the antenna. But the 2 types I'm going to give her is the psychic type and the fighting type. Psychic type because she is a skilled telepath, she is. And the fighting type because she is a skilled martial artist as well. Next up, we have the funny fish meme guy. We have Adam Warlock. I really hope someone gets that reference. If you don't, Henry, put up the meme right now. Adam Warlock is a hard one to think of. I tried to look into him. I don't understand what his powers really are. So I'm going to make him a psychic flying type. I was thinking fire, but I didn't see anything about pyrokinesis or anything with his powers. So I'm just going to make him a psychic flying type. Psychic because he's an alien and shoots energy beams, and flying because he flies. Finally, we have the somewhat member. I mean, like, he's kind of is, kind of isn't. We have Yondu. Now, in the MCU, Yondu is not a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But in the comics, before they changed the Guardians into who they are now, he was one of the members up there with these guys. I don't think anybody knows who these other people are. But anyway, aside from that, I'm going to make Yondu a pure normal type. Main reason because he has that little arrow thing that he controls with his whistle. And what is whistling? It's sound. The last Marvel team I'm going to be looking at is the X-Men. Now, similar to the Avengers, there are and I mean so fucking many members of the Avengers of the X-Men. So I'm just going to pick in the more well-known ones, I guess. Starting with probably the face of the X-Men fan, or just mutants in general, we have Wolverine. I have 3 types for Wolverine, starting with the steel type. I mean, his bones are actual metal, they're adamantium, as well as the claws, obviously, as well. Second type I'm thinking is the dark type. Dark because he's a very aggressive hero, he is. I was kind of actually going to put him with the anti-heroes, but honestly, I see him more as an actual hero in general. And the last type is the fighting type. And the reason for the fighting type is because he's an incredibly skilled fighter, he is. But if I would have to pick only 2, I would make him a steel dark type. Next up, we have Professor X, and I think Professor X should just be a pure psychic type. Actually, a lot of these heroes are just going to be like one type. Let's just go through all of them. Cyclops should be a fire type. Jean Grey should be a psychic type. Angel should be a flying type. Iceman should be, well, I don't really need to explain that one. And Nightcrawler should be a dark type. Next up, we have Beast. Beast is a kind of a weird one because there's essentially 2 versions of Beast. We have the original Beast that he was before his transformation, and now his transformation version where he's just a big hairy dude. But I think Beast should be a dark psychic type. Dark because of the literal beast side of him, and psychic because he's a really, really intelligent scientist, he is. Next up, we have Colossal. I think he should be a steel fighting type, as he is the muscle of the group, and he's just an Iron Man. He's not actual Iron Man. He's just a metal guy, so steel type. Next up, we have Storm, who I'm going to be making a electric flying type. Kind of similar to what I did before, just get rid of the fairy type. That's basically what Storm is. Next up, we have Rogue. I think Rogue should be a pure normal type, as her mutant powers is the ability to steal other people's powers. And obviously, if she steals someone else's powers, her normal type would change to that other person's type. Finally, we have Psylocke. Who the fuck is Psylocke? She's in Marvel Rivals, so I felt like I had to talk about her. I'm going to make Psylocke a psychic fighting type. Now, I don't really fully understand her powers. All that I know that she can put up this giant energy blade thing, which is the reason why psychic type is there, as well as the fighting type. Honestly, not the strongest reasoning, but I couldn't think of anything else. Now we're just going to be looking at superheroes that aren't really part of a team. They're just kind of doing their own thing, like solo heroes, or as I put it in the script, others. Starting, we have the most iconic superhero of all time. We have Spider-Man. Being a superhero who has the abilities of spiders, he should be 100% a bug type. The other types I want to give him is the fighting type and the flying type. Fighting type because he is very, very heroic hero. He is similar to Captain America. And flying type is a bit of a weird one, honestly. It's only because of him swinging around. I couldn't really think of anything else, but I think bug fighting should be it for Spider-Man. Next up, we have Sorcerer Supreme himself, Doctor Strange. I think Doctor Strange should be a pure psychic type. He is the most powerful magic wielder of all time. You could give him fairy, but he isn't a god. I don't really want to give him that. Instead, I'm just going to make him a pure psychic type. That may be a bit controversial, but hey, it's an opinion for a reason. Next up, we have Black Panther, and he's a really hard one to think of, honestly. I can only think of 3 types for him, being the dark type, the fighting type, and the steel type. Dark type because, honestly, it's only just because he's in a black suit. That's all I could think of. And also kind of similar to why I gave it to Beast and Wolverine. It's a very animalistic hero. Fighting type because he is an incredible skilled martial artist. And steel because the MCU, Black Panther has like a metal suit, or vibranium suit actually. I don't know if it's like that in the comics though, but I'm only just doing that because of the MCU. But if I would have to pick 2 types for him, I would make him a steel fighting type. Next up, we have somewhat of an Avenger. We have Ant-Man. I'm going to be making Ant-Man a bug psychic type. Bug because I don't really need to explain the bug type, honestly. And psychic because of how intelligent he is. He was picked by Eternity, who is essentially God, as Scientist Supreme. So yeah, I think he deserves the psychic type, honestly. Next up, we have Wasp. Now, unlike with Ant-Man, who is so goddamn intelligent, he's picked by God himself. Wasp is just kind of boring, so I think I'm just going to give her the bug flying type, because that's kind of her main thing. She does shoot like energy beams, but I don't think she deserves it. Maybe I just don't like Wasp. I think I just don't like Wasp in general. Next up, we have Captain Marvel. Now, this one is a bit of a problem because there are, as I found, 4 versions of Captain Marvel, but I'm specifically looking at Carol Danvers' version. I think Captain Marvel should just be a pure psychic type. She has like all the typical powers that usual superheroes have, like energy powers and flight and stuff like that. So I'm just going to make her a pure psychic type. Next up, we have the more edgy version of Iron Man. We have War Machine. War Machine being Iron Man just with guns. I think he should just be a pure steel type then. Next up, we have the hero that will not only protect you in the streets, but will also protect you against the law. We have Daredevil. I think Daredevil should be a dark fighting type. Dark because he's a very aggressive hero, he is. And fighter because he's incredibly skilled martial artist, he is. Oh yeah, another reason for the dark type is because, you know, he can't see because he's blind. Because, you know, it's pitch black. Get it? No? Yeah, alright. Next up, we have the Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer being a man made out of pure cosmic energy, as well as a sick surfer, dude. I think should be a psychic flying type. Psychic, again, because of the whole cosmic powers, and flying because, well, we can fly. Next up, we have Black Bolt. Black Bolt should be a normal flying type. Normal because of sound. I mean, his whole gimmick is that he can't speak, because if he makes a single noise by speaking with his mouth, it will obliterate a fucking building, it would. And flying because he flies. Next up, we have my least favorite Marvel show of all time. It's, I hate it. I fucking hate that show so much. We have She-Hulk. I think She-Hulk should be a pure fighting type. Unlike with her cousin, the Hulk, I don't think she needs the psychic type, the dark type, or the poison type. All of them mainly because they fit more with Hulk than with She-Hulk. And another reason to give She-Hulk the fighting type is because she's a lawyer. She's a protector. Well, no, she's a fighter against the law, which is a probably another reason to give fighting type to Daredevil as well. Next up, we have Iron Fist. Now, even though he's called Iron Fist, I'm not giving him steel type, but I'm going to give him fighting and psychic. Fighting because he is one of the most talented martial artists in the Marvel universe, and psychic because, well, he's a monk. Next up, we have Luke Cage. Luke Cage's whole gimmick is that he's just bulletproof pretty much and really strong, so I'm going to make Luke Cage a steel fighting type. Next up, we have Quicksilver. I don't know if this really fits, but maybe electric, because he's like really fast and like electric, like electricity. It's not the strong, it barely makes any sense, but like, what else are we going to give Quicksilver? Like, are we going to make him steel type because it's called silver? Next up, we have Hercules. Yes, Hercules. He is a hero in the Marvel universe. Being essentially a demigod, I think he should be fighting fairy. Fighting because, again, he's the god of strength he is. And fairy because he is essentially a fucking god. Next up, we have Spider-Woman. Spider-Woman is a weird one because I think I was gonna just give her the same type as Spider-Man, but apparently she can shoot out electricity, so bug electric. Next up, we have Vision. Vision could potentially be a steel, psychic, or ghost type. Steel because he's a robot, he is. Psychic because of his energy beams he shoots from his forehead. And this one is a weird one, but Ghost because he can phase through walls. Honestly, the psychic is a bit weak, I won't lie. So I'm gonna make it more interesting and make him a steel ghost type. Next up, we have Nova. Nova being he's basically just like a male version of Captain Marvel, so just make him a psychic type. Next up, we've got Captain Britain, innit? With Captain Britain, I think he'd be a psychic type. That sounds so fucking retarded. So Captain Britain, I think, should be a psychic type. Maybe poison, because he's British, and you know, the British people are disgusting looking. Next up, we have Songbird. Songbird should be a psychic, flying, or normal type. Psychic because, I mean, she just shoots out energy beams and stuff like that. Flying because, I mean, she is called Songbird and she does have wings to fly. And normal because, well, she's called Songbird, so she must have sound powers, right? Next up, we have Man-Thing. Being a big swampy boy, I think should be a water, grass, and also fire type. Now, water, grass, I mean, he's a big swamp monster. What is swamp? It's grass and water, okay? But fire is a bit of an interesting one. Main reason for fire is because when he basically touches anybody, they burst into flames. That's how his powers work. I don't know why. I think it's because of like the fear or something. I don't get it. But honestly, it doesn't matter. I'm just going to make him a water grass type. Maybe he learns Fire Punch or something, honestly, I don't know. Next up, we have Stingray. He's just some aquatic guy in some sort of aquatic suit, so water type. Now, for these last two, these are heroes that I generally did not know existed until Marvel Rivals. Starting with Luna Snow. From what I can see, from what her powers are, she has the ability to use ice, but she's also a pop star, or well, actually she's a K-pop star actually. So maybe normal because of sound then. So a normal ice type. Next up, we have Magic. From what I gathered, Magic is like a magical sorcerer warrior, so psychic fighting. Finally, we have the final superhero, by far the most iconic superhero, like more than Spider-Man, than Batman, than Superman, than Iron Man, any of that. Nobody compared to this incredible and most well-known superhero of all time. We have Reptile. Okay, let me do a bit of explaining. So while I was making this video, I came across this video, I'll put it up on screen, about this old show I used to watch called Superhero Squad. It was a Marvel show. It was made before Disney bought Marvel, and it was quite weird. It was a weird show, but one of the characters that constantly reappeared all the time was this hero called Reptile. He was essentially a Mexican-American kid who had the ability to change his body and like body parts into dinosaurs, which from a person when I was a kid and fucking loved dinosaurs, he was fucking cool as hell. But yeah, it just reminded me of that when I was making this video. I kind of wanted to feature him because I think nobody knows who this guy is. So anyway, Reptile would be a dragon rock type. Dragon because his whole powers is all about dinosaurs, and rock because how he got his powers is from this like magical crystal thing that he got when he was going to do paleontology, as he was digging up dinosaurs and stuff like that. This one will be a bit short, but we have gone up to the anti-heroes. There's only a couple, well, I say couple. There's not a lot of them. It won't be like the heroes, but we'll be here for a while. Starting off, we have the Canadian Merc with a mouth. We have Deadpool. Now, I've got 4 types for Deadpool. Starting off, we have the Dark type. Dark because he's a very violent hero, let's admit it. And also, he's also an assassin, so that can also be a good reason for the Dark type. Steel because, I mean, he loves... He's obsessed with guns and bullets, and he also has 2 giant katanas, which are also apparently made out of adamantium, the same shit that Wolverine's bones is made out of. Another type could be Ghost type. Now this was a bit odd, but let me explain. Ghost because he essentially just can't die. He generally just cannot die at all. And also he really wants to fuck death. And when I mean death, I mean not the idea of death. No, there's a character in Marvel who is the Grim Reaper. She's a woman and he wants to fuck her. And there's like a love triangle between him, Death, and Thanos. It's really weird, but hey, Ghost honestly fits quite well with him, I won't lie. He can't die, and he wants to fuck Death. It fits really well. And finally, we have the Fairy type. Now, honestly, this is mainly just a joke type, honestly. But I kind of want to give him the Fairy type only because he has one of the most broken superpowers of all time. Breaking the fourth wall. The literal power to know that the audience is watching you. And he does more than that. There's an entire series where he basically tries to kill every hero in the Marvel universe, and then also kills the writers as well. Like that's a thing. He comes out of the comic to kill the writers, and you gotta have some strong ass magic to do that. That's why the Fairy type is there. All jokes aside, the Dark, Steel, and Ghost honestly fit really well, and I don't really know which one I should give him. I want to give him the Dark Ghost type. Now, yes, Steel works as well because of guns and stuff, but honestly, when it comes to the whole can't die and is in love with death and is an extremely violent man and is an assassin, I think Dark and Ghost fits him really well. So there you go, Dark Ghost for Deadpool. Next up, we have the funny man without love meme guy, aka my favourite Marvel show of all time. We have Moon Knight. Moon Knight is somewhat like Batman, but if Batman was part of the KKK. So I'm going to make Moon Knight a dark fighting type, and maybe psychic as well, because he gets his powers from a literal god, the god of the moon himself. That could be a reason to give him the fairy type, but he isn't a god. He just gets some powers from the god of the moon. So it's just a weaker version, honestly, so psychic fits well. So I'm going to make Moon Knight a dark psychic type. Fighting does fit really well, and it also fits him a lot more than you think, because he was part of the military before he was essentially made into Moon Knight. But I do like the psychic and dark a bit more, so I'm going to make him a dark psychic type. Next up, we have Ghost Rider. Fire, Ghost. It fits so well. Maybe Steel as well. Honestly, Steel could work as well because of his motorbike and because of his chains, but it doesn't matter. Fire Ghost is 100% his type. No arguing with that. Next up, we have the Hulk, but is a bit more fiery. We have Red Hulk. Now, Red Hulk, I think, should be a fire fighting type. Fire because his skin can actually generate heat, basically making his entire body like a fucking furnace. Dark because, I mean, kind of the same reason for the Hulk. He's just an incredibly aggressive hero. I mean, the way the Hulk and Red Hulk work is that the more angry they are, the more stronger they become. And the Dark type is somewhat like an angry type. And fighting because he's incredibly strong and muscly like the Hulk. But if I were to pick only two, I would make him a fire fighting type, just because I just think it fits really well. Next up is a bit of... I don't know if I should make him a hero, an anti-hero, or even a villain. We have Venom. Now, Venom is a hard one, I won't lie. I have 3 possible types for Venom, starting with the poison type. Now, I feel like this is a running thing in my videos now, that if there's a character that has some sort of like gooey base, or works like slime to some extent, it should be poison type, kind of like what I did with the slime in Minecraft. But like, what other type would fit Venom? Next up is the fighting type, and because of how incredibly strong and muscular he is a really strong hero, he is. And fighting because, I mean, Venom, aka the symbiotes, are aliens, they are. I'm going to be making Venom a poison psychic type. Next up, we have the Punisher, who I'm just going to flat out say should just be a pure dark type. Like, I feel like there's no other type that fits him. Defo, just pure dark. Next up, we have a shittier version of Aquaman, which says a lot. We have Namor. I'm going to be making Namor a water flying type. Water because he is the protector of the sea, and he is basically half human, half Atlantean. And flying because he's also a mutant, and his mutant ability is these little wings he has that are on his feet that allow him to fly. Next up, we have Ares. Ares being the god of war. He's 100% going to be a fighting fairy type. Next up, we have the vampire killer, who is also a vampire. We have Blade. Now, because he is a vampire, I think dark type fits really, really well. And fighting because while he is a vampire, he's also a heroic hero, as well as a skilled martial artist. Next up, we have Black Cat. Again, just like with the Punisher, I think she should just be a pure dark type. She's just Catwoman, honestly. Next up, we have Cable. Being a time-traveling man for the future, I think he should be psychic type. Not only psychic type, but also steel type as well, because of his, I don't even know what it is. It's like a disease he has that he got from Apocalypse, which is like him covered in this metal disease. That's basically what it is, but it also gives him incredible strength as well, so it's a bit ironic, I won't lie. Next up, we have Cloak and Dagger. Now, I know these are 2 separate people, but every time I looked up these 2, it always came up with only these 2, if that makes sense. I think Cloak should be a dark type and Dagger should be a fairy type, considering that their both powers are essentially pure darkness and pure light. So that fits, because dark is darkness and fairy is essentially the light type. Finally, we have the Winter Soldier. The Winter Soldier, being a cold-blooded assassin, should be dark type and also steel type because of his robotic arm. Alright, we're finally done with the heroes. Now it is time for the villains. Starting off, we have the Mad Titan himself, Thanos. Thanos is a bit of a hard one, I won't lie. I could only think of Dark Psychic. Dark because he is by far one of the most evilest villains in the Marvel universe. And Psychic because he's an alien. That's basically all I could think of, I won't lie. And also Psychic because of his gauntlet and all the powers he has. He basically has so many powers even before the fucking Infinity Gauntlet. Next up, we have the Red Skull, aka Hitler. Red Skull, I'm just going to make a pure dark type. There's really that much else to say. Next up, we have the God of Mischief, Loki. Loki, I think, should be a dark fairy type. Dark because he's the god of mischief. He's all about tricks and stuff, which the dark type is, that's what it's all about. And fairy type because he's a god. Next up, we have Ultron, who I would make a steel electric type. Steel because, I mean, he's a fucking robot. And electric because of all the stuff he does with viruses and stuff. Next up, we have Doctor Doom. I think Doctor Doom should be a steel psychic type. Steel because of his armor, and psychic because he is actually an incredibly powerful sorcerer. He's so powerful with his magic, he could actually take on Doctor Strange, who is Sorcerer Supreme, which that says a lot. Next up, we have Galactus. Galactus being a big forehead man who eats planets, I think should be a psychic normal type. Now, I was going to give him the fairy type because I thought he was a cosmic god. However, I did not find any evidence that supports that. I don't know if they say it in the comics, but I couldn't find any proof. However, I'm going to give him the psychic type because of his immense cosmic power. And normal because one of the well-known things about Galactus is that he eats planets. And while there isn't really a food type, I think the normal type fits a bit well. Next up, we have the Green Goblin. The Green Goblin could potentially be a steel, dark, or flying type. Steel and I guess flying also because of his glider, and dark because he's just an evil guy. I mean, he's a goblin. I mean, goblins are evil, isn't it? But if I were to pick one or the other, I would make him a steel flying type, I think. Next up, we have Apocalypse. I'm going to make him a psychic steel type. Psychic because of his immense power, and steel because he kind of is a robot. He's like half man, half robot kind of deal. Next up, we have the villain who hates to bargain with. We have Dormammu. Dormammu being a big fire guy, I think should be fire type, but the second type could either be dark or psychic. Dark because he's like pure evil. He is pure evil, and psychic because he's an incredibly powerful sorcerer as well. So honestly, it's really hard to think of what type he should be. Fire obviously, but dark and psychic fit so well. I'm really struggling what to make him. I've made the video and I still don't know what to make him. Okay, I've made up my mind. I'm going to make Dormammu a fire dark type instead of a fire psychic type. And the reason why dark type is because he is the ruler of the dark dimension. Yes, he is a really powerful magic ruler, but because he's the ruler of the dark dimension, I'm going to make him a fire dark type instead. Next up, we have Ego, the living planet. Being a living planet, I'm going to make him a ground psychic type. Ground because he's a living planet, and psychic because of his immense power as well. Next up, we have Anna Highlist, wherever the fuck that is. Honestly, I have no idea who this guy is. For some reason, he was high up on like lists of Marvel villains, but all I could find about this dude is that he's like a alien bug robot thing. So bug steel, I guess. Next up, we have Magneto. This one's a pretty easy one. I think Magneto should just be a pure steel type, as he is a magnet dude, so I think he should just be pure steel. Next up, we have Mystique. Being a very, very stealthy spy, I think she should be a normal dark type. Now, dark obviously because of the spy part, but normal because of her transformation gimmick, pretty much. Next up, we have Hela, aka the god of death, and because she's the god of death, I think she should just be a ghost fairy type. Next up, we have the Abomination. Abomination being pretty much a more evil Hulk, I think he should be a dark fighting type. Dark obviously because he's a villain and he's a very evil guy. And the fighting type is because before he was Abomination, he was part of the military. So he was already trained to be a fighter even before turning into the Abomination. Next up, we have the Super Skrull. The Super Skrull is essentially what happens if you take a normal Skrull and give him all of the powers of the Fantastic Four. That's who you get. Now, because of that, I'm going to be making him a normal psychic type. Psychic because he's a Skrull, he's an alien, but normal because of his entire whole gimmick being shape-shifting. Skrulls can already shapeshift on their own, but having the abilities of the Fantastic Four as well, that sounds pretty cool, I won't lie. Next up, we have Carnage. Carnage is just Venom, but less buff, but way more deadly. I'm going to be making Carnage a poison dark type. While Venom was poison psychic, I think dark fits a lot more with Carnage because of how extremely violent he is. I mean, even if he didn't have the symbiote, he's already a violent dude because he's a complete psychopath. And that's not me joking, that he's canonically a psychopath. Next up, we have Emma Frost. Even though she's called Emma Frost, it's not going to be an ice type. Emma Frost will be a rock psychic type instead. Rock because of her gimmick is to change into this diamond form of her, which makes her incredibly defensive. And psychic because she's also a very powerful telepath as well. I won't lie, I always forget she's a telepath, but then I remember that scene in, I can't remember which X-Men movie it was, where she basically tricks this guy into thinking he's having sex with her. Real or not, that's a W, I won't lie. Next up, we have the Scarlet Witch. I didn't know if I would want to put Scarlet Witch as a hero or anti-hero or villain. Doesn't really matter if I'm going to be honest. What is important is what her type is going to be, and I think she should be a psychic dark type. Mainly for the whole reason that she's just a big old mean witch, she is. I mean, Delphox and Hatterene, who are both psychic type Pokemon, are psychic type because they are both based on witches. So I think Scarlet Witch with her dark psychic type fits really well. Next up we have Kang the Conqueror. I won't lie, Kang's a weird dude. I think he's like an alien or robot. Wherever he is, I'm going to make him still psychic. Now the psychic type is probably the most weakest one out of the two types, mainly because I gave it to him because he's very intelligent. But Steel, on the other hand, is a lot more interesting. I gave him the Steel type because of Kang's whole gimmick, which is all about time. Kang goes through different timelines and, as his name applies, conquers them. Now the reason for these two types are mainly inspired by two Pokemon, that being Celestia and Dialga. Both of these two Pokemon are all about time. Celestia is a grass psychic type who has the ability to travel through time, and Dialga is a steel dragon type who is essentially the god of time, being a duo to the god of space, Palkia. So taking the psychic type and the steel type from those two and giving it to Kang, I think it fits really well. So Kang would be a steel psychic type. Next up we have Mephisto. Mephisto is literally the devil. He is straight up Satan in Marvel. So pure dark, 100%. Next up we have Taskmaster. I'm going to be making Taskmaster the same I did with Mystique by making him a normal dark type. Dark because he's an assassin, and normal because of Taskmaster's gimmick where he basically copies superheroes' like moves and stuff. It's a very weird power, but it's kind of cool, won't lie. Next up we have the Juggernaut.
The Juggernaut is pure fighting type. I mean, there isn't really anything else to talk about. He is pure muscle.
Next up we got Bullseye. Now just like what I did with Hawkeye, I'm going to make him a normal type and maybe a psychic type. Actually, while mentioning about Hawkeye, I may actually make him a normal psychic type. You know what, I've made up my mind. I'm changing Hawkeye's type. I'm going to be making him now a normal psychic type, as well as Bullseye. Next up we have Sabretooth. Sabretooth is just basically just Wolverine, so he's just gonna be dark steel. Next up we have sorry, I just remembered MODOK from Quantum Mania. Oh, so funny. Next up we have MODOK. I got 3 potential types for MODOK. First up is the steel type, because he is essentially all mechanical he is. Then there is the psychic type, because he is a strong telepath. And dark because he's just extremely evil. I mean, MODOK literally means the mental organism designed only for killing. That's what MODOK means. He's made to kill. So I'm going to make MODOK a psychic dark type. Next up we have the leader. I'm going to be making the leader a psychic poison type. Psychic because he's an incredible telepath and has a lot of telepathy powers. He's essentially the mascot of psychic. Like, that's his whole gimmick. And poison because he basically got his powers from radiation, just like the Hulk. Next up we have the lizard. The lizard being just a big fucking reptile, I think it should just be electric. Should just be dragon type. Next up we have Electro. Again, I think he's just electric. Next up we have Sandman, who is he's just going to be ground type. Next up we have the Silver Samurai. The Silver Samurai could potentially be a steel fighting psychic type. Steel because he is the Silver Samurai. Fighting because he's a samurai, and psychic because he's a mutant, and his mutant power is like he can get out this energy sword, not the energy sword, but like a blade made out of pure energy, I think. So honestly, all 3 of the types fit really well, but if I would have to remove one, I may have to get rid of psychic, only because, I mean, he's called the Silver Samurai, and I think the steel and fire type fit really well with that, even though he's a mutant and his gimmick is an energy sword. I'm just going to make him a steel fighting type. Next up we have Atuma. I think I'm saying that right. Atuma is just some fish dude, so I'm just going to make him a pure water type. There's never really else to talk about. Next up we have Absorption Man. Absorption Man should be a normal fighting type. Fighting because he was originally a boxer before he became a criminal, so he's already experienced with fighting. And normal because his whole gimmick is absorbing materials and becoming them. Kind of like Kevin from Ben 10. So that means he can switch to normal normal type into something else like ground or steel or something like that. Next up we have Claw. I think Claw should be a pure normal type only because he is the most sound character ever. He shoots out sound. His suit is made out of sound. How does that work? No fucking idea, but it's fucking cool. Make him a normal type. Next up we have the funniest villain of all time. It's Morbin type. Still funny. We have Morbius. Morbius, being a big vampire man, I think should be a dark type, as well as flying because, well, he flies. Next up we have Radiation Man. I won't lie, I'm scraping the barrel when it comes to these villains. Who actually knows who Radiation Man is? He's just a guy that has radiation powers, so make him a pure poison type. Next up we have Wizard. Who the fuck is Wizard? I don't know. Steel Psychic. Next up we have Hydro Man, another stupid supervillain. You probably know him from, I think it was the second Spider-Man movie in the MCU. Yeah, that big water dude, that's Hydro Man. Being a water man, I think it should be obviously water type. Next up we have Grim Reaper. Pretty much being the Grim Reaper himself, I'm going to make him a dark psychic type because his whole powers is having dark magic pretty much, so dark psychic fits really well. Finally we have the Crimson Dynamo. The Crimson Dynamo is essentially Iron Man but Russian, so I'm going to make him a steel electric type. Steel because of the Iron Man thing, but also electric because he has magnetism powers. And if you see my Overwatch video, you know that if there's a character that has magnet powers, it's going to be steel electric, just like with Junker Queen. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. That is a shit ton of superheroes and villains from the Marvel universe and giving them their very own Pokemon types. Hopefully this video comes out after Marvel Rivals comes out. I hope to God it's good. I hope. I'm fucking fingers crossed. But anyway guys, that will be it for the video. If you guys enjoyed this video, why don't consider liking. If you want to see more content like this, subscribe. And if you want to get notified whenever I make a new video, hit that notification bell. Check out my Twitter where I post tweets like this. Check out my Instagram where I post images like this. And check out my TikTok where I post videos like this. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll hopefully see you guys in the next video.